The stars looked peaceful from the bridge of the UES Vigilant. Captain Jake Morrison watched the gentle dance of distant suns through the massive viewing screen, his coffee growing cold in his hands. 50 years had passed since the last Galactic War ended, and most days felt like this. Quiet patrol runs through empty space, checking on mining colonies and trade routes that rarely saw trouble. "Captain, we're getting a transmission from Kepler Station," said Lieutenant Amy Brooks from her communication post. "Routine check-in from the Zeltharian mining operation." Jake nodded and settled back into his command chair. The Zeltharians used to rule half the galaxy before the war. Now they dug precious metals out of asteroids under human supervision. It was a strange world they lived in now, where the proudest warrior race in known space asked permission to move their own ships. "Put them through," Jake said. The screen flickered and showed a tall, blue-skinned alien with 4 arms and golden eyes. The Zeltharian wore the simple work clothes of a miner, but Jake could see the military bearing in his straight back and careful movements. Most of the alien workers were former soldiers who had no other choice after their fleets were destroyed. "Captain Morrison," the alien said in careful English, "this is Foreman Kexhigh reporting from Mining Platform 7. Our monthly extraction targets have been met. We request permission to begin operations on asteroid field Delta 9. "Permission granted, Foreman," Jake replied. "Any problems with your equipment or crew?" "None, sir. All workers remain cooperative." Jake heard the slight pause and knew what it meant. Some of the younger Zeltharians were getting restless, asking questions about why they had to ask humans for permission to do everything. The older ones who remembered the war kept them in line, but those veterans were getting fewer each year. After ending the transmission, Jake walked to the observation deck where Chief Engineer Lisa Park was running diagnostics on their quantum drive systems. Lisa was one of the smartest people he'd ever met, and she'd helped design the technology that gave humanity its edge in the war. She looked up from her work tablet as he approached. "The Zeltharians seem nervous lately," she said without looking up from her readings. "Third time this month they've asked for permission to do routine mining operations they've been cleared for since last year." "Maybe they're just being extra careful," Jake suggested, but he didn't believe it himself. "Or maybe the young ones are asking uncomfortable questions and the old ones are scared of what might happen if they can't control them," Lisa replied. She finally looked at him, her brown eyes serious. "Jake, I've been monitoring communication patterns across all the alien colonies. Chatter is up 30% in the last 6 months. Secret messages, coded transmissions, stuff that shouldn't be happening if everyone's happy with the current arrangement." Before Jake could respond, Commander Ryan Bell joined them on the observation deck. Ryan was a former ground forces veteran who'd been at the final battle on Kepler 442b, one of the few humans who'd seen the alien surrender ceremonies in person. He was a quiet man who rarely talked about the war, but Jake had learned to listen when he had something to say. "Captain, we just received new patrol orders from command," Ryan said, handing Jake a datapad. "They want us to extend our route to include the Vega system. Apparently, a Zeltharian mining vessel went missing there 3 days ago." Jake frowned as he read the orders. The Sword of Zephyr was a massive ship with a crew of 2,000. Ships that big didn't just disappear, especially not in a system as well-traveled as Vega. "Pirates?" Lisa asked. "That's what the initial report suggests," Ryan said. "But I've been thinking about something. Remember how the aliens used to test our responses before the war? Small raids, missing ships, probing attacks to see how we'd react?" Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The last Galactic War had started exactly that way, with mysterious disappearances and unexplained attacks that seemed like random piracy until the pattern became clear. The aliens had been testing humanity's defenses, looking for weak points before launching their main assault. "You think they're testing us again?" Jake asked. "I think the generation that fought us is dying off," Ryan said quietly. "And their kids don't understand why everyone's so afraid of humans who spend most of their time delivering supplies and mediating trade disputes." Meanwhile, halfway across the galaxy, Ambassador Kate Hughes was discovering just how right Ryan was. She stood in the Grand Council chamber of New Geneva Station, watching representatives from dozens of species debate trade regulations and territorial boundaries. The discussions were polite and orderly, but Kate had learned to read the subtle signs of alien body language over her years as a diplomat. The younger alien delegates were different from their elders. Where the older generation spoke to humans with careful respect, These young aliens barely concealed their resentment. A young Zeltharian prince named Zextar the Bold had been particularly vocal about what he called outdated restrictions on his people's military rebuilding. "Ambassador Hughes," came a voice behind her. She turned to see Dr. Nathan Webb, a historian who specialized in pre-war alien cultures. "Do you have a moment to discuss some concerning trends I've been observing?" They walked to her private office, where Nathan pulled out a thick folder of documents and recordings. "I've been studying communication patterns and social media posts from young aliens across multiple species," Nathan explained. "There's a growing movement that believes the stories about human military superiority are exaggerated. They think the older generation surrendered too quickly out of cowardice rather than necessity." Kate sat down heavily in her chair. "Show me." Nathan activated a holographic display that showed social media posts translated from various alien languages. The messages were troubling. Young aliens calling their elders cowards, questioning why mighty species like the Zeltharians and Krix submitted to weak humans, and sharing conspiracy theories about human technology being stolen rather than developed. "The worst part," Nathan continued, "is that some of them are starting to organize. They're calling themselves the Liberation Coalition, small groups meeting in secret, sharing resources, talking about restoring galactic dignity. Have they made any actual moves yet?" Kate asked. "Nothing concrete, but the pattern is building. Increased recruitment among military-aged aliens, requests for historical battle data that could be used for tactical planning, and purchases of civilian ships that could easily be converted for military use." Kate thought about the missing Zeltharian mining vessel that Jake's ship was investigating, a ship with 2,000 trained workers who used to be soldiers, a ship that disappeared in a remote system where no one would notice if it was converted into something more dangerous. "Nathan, I need you to prepare a full report for Terran Command," she said. "Include everything you've found and mark it Priority 1. "Do you think they're actually planning something?" Nathan asked. Kate looked out her office window at the peaceful station where representatives from dozens of species worked together on trade deals and diplomatic agreements. It was a beautiful sight, this galactic harmony that had taken 50 years to build. But she remembered something her grandfather had told her about the time before the last Galactic War. How peaceful everything had seemed right up until the shooting started. "I think," she said slowly, "that we're about to find out if the next generation of aliens is as smart as their parents were." As if summoned by her words, her communication system chimed with an urgent message from the Outer Rim territories. Captain Morrison's ship had found the wreckage of the Sword of Zephyr, but the crew was nowhere to be found. More troubling still, the ship's weapon systems had been stripped out with professional precision. The peaceful years were coming to an end, and Kate Hughes had the sinking feeling that humanity was about to be reminded why they had fought so hard to win the last war. Deep beneath the surface of Titan Station, in maintenance tunnels that hadn't seen official use in decades, Prince Zextar the Bold stood before representatives of 7 different alien species. The young Zeltharian's golden eyes gleamed with excitement as he looked at his gathered allies. This was the moment they had all been working toward for months. "Friends," Zextar began, his voice echoing in the metal chamber, "today we begin the liberation of our peoples from human tyranny." Around him sat the most dangerous collection of alien leaders the galaxy had seen since the last Galactic War. Hive Mother. Sklix of the Krix clicked her mandibles in approval. Her insectoid features twisted into what passed for a smile among her species. The Krix had once consumed entire star systems, but now they were forced to grow crops for human colonies. The humiliation burned in her compound eyes. Mindspeaker Thylos of the Vorthak Collective nodded silently, his massive head pulsing with telepathic energy. The Vorthak had once controlled lesser species through mental domination, but human minds remained stubbornly resistant to their influence. It was a mystery that had plagued his people for 50 years. "The humans believe they have broken us," Zextar continued. "They think we will remain their servants forever, grateful for the scraps they throw us. But we are the sons and daughters of warriors. We carry the blood of conquerors in our veins." General Thakmor of the Brutani Empire slammed his massive fist on the table. The 7-foot-tall humanoid was covered in thick gray hide and battle scars from the war. "My people grow weak tending their farms," he growled. "Young Brutani ask me why we do not fight. I have no answer that does not shame me. Because your elders filled your heads with stories about human demons. said Captain Veltar of the Sindari Republic. The blue-skinned female was the youngest leader present, barely old enough to remember the war's end. They made you afraid of your own shadows. Zextar smiled at her words. This was exactly the attitude he needed to spread throughout the galaxy. Captain Veltar speaks truth. The humans are not gods. They are not demons. They are simply another species that got lucky with technology and used fear to make us surrender. Mind Speaker Thylos projected his thoughts into their minds, his telepathic voice carrying cold certainty. I have touched human consciousness during diplomatic meetings. They are no different from us. They feel fear, doubt, uncertainty. The stories of their mental strength are myths created to explain our defeat. Hive Mother Cyclix clicked her approval. My drones have analyzed human military installations. Their numbers are small. Their weapons, while advanced, are not magical. We outnumber them 1,000 to 1 across all species. Then why did we lose the war? Asked Commander Zhektai of the Vorthon clans, his reptilian features showing genuine confusion. Because our ancestors fought them one species at a time, Zextar explained. The Zeltharians attacked first and were defeated. The Crick swarmed second and were crushed. The Vorthak tried to control them third and failed. Each species faced humanity alone while the others watched and waited. This time will be different, General Thakmor said, understanding dawning in his small eyes. Exactly, Zextar confirmed. This time we fight together. 7 species, coordinated assault, simultaneous strikes across multiple systems. They cannot be everywhere at once. He activated a holographic projector that showed detailed schematics of human military installations, patrol routes, and defensive positions. The intelligence was remarkably detailed, showing the locations of weapon stockpiles, command centers, and even the personal schedules of key human officers. Where did you get this information? Captain Veltar asked, impressed despite herself. From humans themselves, Zextar laughed. They have grown careless in their 50 years of peace. Their computer networks are surprisingly easy to infiltrate when you know the right techniques. They never expected us to learn their own methods. What he didn't tell them was that the information had cost him everything. 3 years of careful planning, bribing corrupt officials, and stealing classified data. He had sold his family's remaining wealth to fund the operation and convinced dozens of young aliens to risk their lives gathering intelligence. Mind Speaker Thylos probed the room with his telepathic abilities, reading the surface thoughts of his allies. He sensed excitement, determination, and hunger for revenge. But he also detected something else, fear hidden deep beneath their confident words. The older generation's warnings had left their mark, even on those who claimed not to believe them. What about weapons? Hive Mother Cyclix asked. Human technology is still superior to ours. Zextar's smile grew wider. We have been busy, my friend. Show them, Commander Zhektai. The reptilian commander activated another hologram that showed sleek warships under construction in hidden shipyards throughout the Andromeda Drift. The vessels were clearly based on stolen human designs but incorporated alien improvements, larger energy cores, heavier armor plating, and weapon systems that combined the best of multiple species technologies. 37 ships ready for combat, Zhektai reported. Another 15 will be completed within the month. Each vessel crewed by volunteers from all our species. Volunteers? General Thakmor asked. Young warriors who understand that freedom must be taken, not given. Zextar replied. Veterans of the mining operations who remember how to fight. Engineers who learned human technology while maintaining their equipment. We have been preparing for this moment since the day we realized the older generation would never act. Captain Veltar studied the ship designs with a professional eye. These are impressive, but they're still based on 50-year-old human technology. What makes you think they haven't improved their weapons since then? Because they haven't needed to, Mind Speaker Thylos answered. I have touched the minds of human military leaders during peace negotiations. They are comfortable, lazy, unprepared for real war. They patrol empty space and mediate trade disputes. Their weapons gather dust in storage facilities. Hive Mother Cyclix clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. My drones have observed human patrol patterns. The same routes, the same schedules, the same small crews. They have grown predictable, and their numbers remain small, added General Thakmor. How many humans serve in their military? A few million across the entire galaxy. We have more warriors on single worlds. Zextar nodded approvingly. His allies were beginning to see the truth he had discovered through months of careful study. Humanity had won the last galactic war through surprise, superior technology, and the mistakes of alien commanders who underestimated them. But 50 years of peace had made them soft, while the younger generation of aliens had learned from their ancestors' failures. "When do we strike?" Commander Jektai asked. "Soon," Zextar replied. "But first we must complete our preparations. Each species will target human installations in their home system simultaneously. The attacks must be coordinated perfectly to prevent them from mounting an effective response." He distributed data tablets to each leader, containing detailed attack plans specific to their species' capabilities. The Krix would use their swarming tactics to overwhelm human defensive positions. The Brutani would launch direct assaults on military bases. The Vorthak would attempt to disrupt human communications through telepathic interference. "Remember," Zextar said as the meeting concluded, "this is not just about defeating them in battle. It is about proving to the galaxy that humans are not invincible. Once other species see them bleed, the revolution will spread beyond our coalition." As the alien leaders filed out through different maintenance tunnels to avoid detection, Mind Speaker Thylos lingered behind. He approached Zextar with his massive frame moving silently across the metal floor. "You are confident in this plan," Thylos said, his telepathic voice carrying undertones of concern. "But I have touched human minds, young prince. There is something about them that troubles me." "What do you mean?" Zextar asked. "They think differently than we do. Their mental patterns are strange, chaotic but focused, wild but disciplined. I cannot fully understand their consciousness, and that worries me." Zextar waved dismissively. "You worry too much, old friend. Mystery does not equal power. Perhaps human minds are simply more primitive than yours, too simple for you to understand." Thylos nodded slowly, but the concern remained in his alien features. As he left the chamber, he carried with him a nagging doubt that would prove prophetic in the weeks to come. The human mind was indeed different from alien consciousness, but not in the way any of them expected. Above them, in the civilian sections of Titan Station, human families went about their daily lives unaware that war was coming. Children played in parks while their parents worked honest jobs maintaining the peace their ancestors had died to create. None of them knew that beneath their feet, the next galactic war had just been declared. Dr. Sam Carter stared at the intelligence reports scattered across his desk, his coffee growing cold as the pieces of the puzzle finally came together. As head of the Human Defense Research Institute, he had access to information that would terrify most civilians. But this was different. This was the nightmare scenario every defense analyst had hoped would never come. "Computer, display threat assessment summary," he said to his office AI. The holographic display showed a galaxy-wide map with red warning markers appearing across dozens of systems. Missing ships, unusual communication patterns, unauthorized technology transfers, and movement of military-aged aliens to remote locations. Individually, each incident could be explained away. Together, they painted a picture that made Sam's blood run cold. His door chimed and Admiral Beth Stone entered without waiting for permission. The hero of the Siege of Earth looked older than her 60 years, her gray hair pulled back in the military style she had worn since the war. But her eyes were still sharp, and Sam could see the old fire burning behind them as she studied his displays. "How bad is it?" she asked without preamble. "Bad enough that I activated the Phoenix Protocol," Sam replied, referring to the emergency communication system that could reach every human military commander in the galaxy within minutes. Beth's eyebrows rose. The Phoenix Protocol hadn't been used since the end of the last galactic war. "Show me everything." Sam activated his comprehensive analysis. The display showed shipping records, communication intercepts, and surveillance footage from across alien space. It started with the missing Zeltharian mining vessel that Captain Morrison investigated, but that was just the beginning. The hologram focused on the Andromeda Drift, a region of space considered too remote for major operations. Our long-range sensors detected unusual energy signatures here. When we sent a stealth probe to investigate, we found this. The image that appeared made Beth curse under her breath. Hidden among the asteroids were massive shipyards producing vessels clearly based on human designs. The construction was professional, coordinated, and far more advanced than anything the aliens should have been capable of building. 37 completed warships, Sam continued, each one crewed by aliens who supposedly work in mining operations and agricultural colonies. but facial recognition software identified former military officers from multiple species. Who's leading this? Beth asked. Prince Zextar, the Bold of the Zeltharians, appears to be the primary coordinator. But he's working with representatives from at least 6 other species. They're calling themselves the Liberation Coalition. Beth studied the enemy ship designs with a professional eye. They were clearly based on stolen human technology, but incorporated alien improvements that actually made them more dangerous than the originals. Larger energy cores meant more powerful weapons. Heavier armor would make them harder to destroy, and the coordination between species suggested a level of cooperation that the aliens had never achieved during the original war. What's their timeline? She asked. Unknown, but our analysis suggests they're close to operational readiness. We've detected increased recruitment among young aliens, stockpiling of military supplies, and coordination meetings in remote locations. Admiral Stone activated her command communicator. Priority Alpha message to all sector commanders. Report to New Terra Command immediately for emergency briefing. Authorization Stone 77 Alpha. As confirmation signals came back from across human space, Beth turned back to Sam's analysis. What's the assessment of their chances? Sam pulled up tactical projections that he had hoped never to create. If they achieve strategic surprise and coordinate their attacks properly, they could inflict significant damage before we can respond. Their fleet is smaller than ours, but they're concentrated while we're spread across patrol duties throughout the galaxy. And if they target civilian populations, then we have a problem. Our current force deployment is designed for peacekeeping, not war. Most of our heavy weapons are in storage, and our personnel haven't trained for full-scale combat in decades. Beth was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical displays. Sam could see her mind working, calculating probabilities and strategic options. She had been the architect of humanity's victory in the last Galactic War, and her tactical brilliance was legendary, but that had been 50 years ago, against enemies who fought them one species at a time. Admiral, Sam said quietly, there's something else you need to see. He activated another display that showed communication intercepts from alien social media and underground networks. The messages were troubling. Young aliens across dozens of worlds expressing support for the Liberation Coalition, calling for an end to human dominance, and spreading conspiracy theories about human weaknesses. They don't remember the war, Beth said, understanding immediately. The generation that fought us is dying off, and their children think we're just another species. That's not the worst part, Sam continued. Our psychological analysis suggests that many young aliens actually want a war. They see conflict as a chance to prove themselves and restore what they call galactic dignity. Beth activated her personal communication device. Get me Colonel Jack Hayes, she ordered. Jack had led the infamous Scorched Sky campaign that broke alien resistance during the war's final phase. If anyone understood what was coming, it would be him. While they waited for the connection, Sam pulled up classified files that had been sealed since the war's end. Admiral, we need to discuss reactivating the restricted weapon systems. Beth's expression grew grim. The restricted weapons were the tools humanity had developed during the darkest days of the war. Technology so devastating that they had been banned by the Terra Accords. Quantum virus programs that could shut down entire star systems. Nano-swarm weapons that consumed enemy fleets at the molecular level. Psychological warfare techniques that broke enemy morale before the first shot was fired. Hoped we would never need those again, she said. So did I. But the aliens have forgotten why we banned them in the first place, Colonel. Hayes' scarred face appeared on the communication screen. Even at 70 years old, the former ground forces commander looked like he could still lead troops into battle. His eyes immediately focused on the tactical displays behind Beth and Sam. How long do we have? He asked without greeting. Unknown, but probably not long, Beth replied. We need to prepare for the possibility of coordinated attacks across multiple systems. Hayes nodded grimly. I'll begin mobilizing the reserve fleets and recalling personnel from retirement. But Admiral, we have a problem. Most of our current officers have never seen real combat. They've spent their careers on peacekeeping missions and diplomatic escorts. Then we'll have to teach them quickly, Beth said. Sam, begin unsealing the classified archives. I want every weapon design, tactical protocol, and strategic analysis from the war available for immediate deployment. As Sam's fingers moved across his control panel, activating systems that had been dormant for 50 years, he felt a familiar chill. The last time these archives had been opened, The galaxy had burned. Entire star systems had been turned into graveyards. Billions of aliens had died learning why humanity was not to be crossed. "Admiral," he said quietly, "what if we're overreacting? What if the Coalition backs down when they realize we're onto them?" Beth Stone looked at him with the eyes of a woman who had seen 2 billion humans die during the siege of Earth. "Dr. Carter, 50 years ago, I watched alien fleets reduce our homeworld to ash and rubble. I saw children burned alive in the streets of New York and London. I held dying soldiers who gave everything to push the invaders back." She turned back to the tactical displays showing the Coalition's hidden fleet. The aliens started this war when they forgot that peace is not weakness. Now they're about to learn the same lesson their ancestors did, that humanity doesn't want to fight. But we're very, very good at it when we have to be. Across the galaxy, other human commanders were reaching the same conclusions. On patrol ships like the UES Vigilant, veteran officers were breaking out weapon systems that had been sealed away since the war. On colony worlds, defense coordinators were updating evacuation plans that hadn't been reviewed in decades. In research facilities throughout human space, scientists were powering up technologies that could remake the face of warfare. The aliens had spent 50 years planning their rebellion. Humanity would spend the next few weeks reminding them why their ancestors had surrendered in the first place. The peaceful years were ending, and both sides knew that the next war would determine the future of galactic civilization. The Liberation Coalition believed they were fighting for freedom. Humanity knew they were fighting for survival. Only one side understood the true cost of losing. The first attacks came at dawn across 12 different star systems. Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the alarms started screaming throughout the UES Vigilant. Within seconds, his peaceful patrol mission became a fight for survival as Coalition warships dropped out of hyperspace around his position. "Multiple contacts," Lieutenant Amy Brooks reported, her voice tight with controlled fear. 30-plus enemy vessels, mixed species configurations. They're targeting our communication array." Jake's training from 50 years of peace almost failed him. For a split second, he stared at the tactical display showing enemy ships that shouldn't exist, weapons that should have been impossible for aliens to build, and coordination that defied everything he thought he knew about alien capabilities. "Evasive maneuvers," he ordered, sliding into the command mindset that had been drilled into every human officer since the last war. "Chief Park, bring all weapons online. Commander Bell, prepare for close combat." The UES Vigilant shuddered as enemy fire struck their shields. Through the view screen, Jake could see ships built with stolen human technology but improved with alien innovations. They moved with deadly precision, their attacks coordinated perfectly across multiple species. "Sir, they're using quantum torpedoes," Chief Engineer Lisa Park reported with disbelief. "Those are restricted weapons. How did they get access to the specifications?" Before Jake could answer, the ship's communication system crackled with an alien voice speaking perfect English. "Attention, human vessel. This is Prince Zextar, the Bold of the Liberation Coalition. Surrender your ship and prepare to be boarded. The age of human domination is over." Jake keyed his response with cold fury. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Terran Defense Force. You are in violation of the Terra Accords and are ordered to stand down immediately." Zextar's laughter echoed through the bridge. "The Terra Accords were forced upon us by terror and lies. Today we break those chains forever." The enemy fleet resumed firing with increased intensity. Jake's ship was outnumbered 30-1, but the UES Vigilant was a modern human warship designed by people who remembered the last war. As Coalition forces closed in for the kill, Jake smiled grimly and activated systems that hadn't been used in combat for 50 years. "Chief Park, activate the quantum cloak. All weapons to full power." The UES Vigilant suddenly vanished from enemy sensors as its quantum cloak bent space around the ship. Coalition forces found themselves firing at empty space while Jake's weapons locked onto their targets with devastating precision. When the Vigilant reappeared, it was in the middle of the enemy formation with all guns blazing. The battle lasted only 12 minutes. When it was over, 23 Coalition ships were debris floating in space, and the survivors were fleeing at maximum speed toward their hidden bases. Jake's ship had taken damage, but his crew was alive and his weapons were still functional. But the UES Vigilant was just one ship in one system. Across the galaxy, the Liberation Coalition's coordinated assault was achieving its primary objective: proving that humans could be hurt. On the agricultural world of New Sydney, 2 million human civilians woke up to the sound of orbital bombardment. Coalition forces had appeared without warning and begun systematically destroying the planet's infrastructure. The attack wasn't designed to conquer the world. It was meant to send a message that humanity was no longer untouchable. Governor Lisa Martinez stood in the emergency bunker beneath New Sydney's capital city, watching through satellite feeds as her world burned. The coalition forces were being methodical, targeting power plants, communication centers, and transportation hubs. They weren't trying to kill civilians, but they were making it clear that they could if they wanted to. "Ma'am, we're receiving evacuation orders from Terran Command," reported her aide, a young man whose hands shook as he delivered the message. "All civilian populations in contested systems are to be relocated immediately." Lisa nodded grimly. She had been alive during the last war, had been a child when the aliens attacked Earth itself. She remembered the refugee camps, the food shortages, and the constant fear that humanity might not survive. Now it was happening again, and she wondered if the current generation would prove as strong as their ancestors. In space above New Sydney, Admiral Beth Stone watched the planet's evacuation through the command center of the UES Devastator, humanity's largest warship. Her fleet had arrived too late to prevent the initial attack, but they were in time to witness something that would change the course of the new war. "Admiral, we're detecting massive communication bursts from the Coalition fleet," reported her intelligence officer. "They're broadcasting footage of the attack to every inhabited system in the galaxy." Beth watched the alien propaganda with growing anger. The Coalition wanted other species to see humans running, to witness their civilians fleeing in panic. It was a psychological warfare tactic designed to encourage more species to join their rebellion. "Signal all ships," Beth ordered. "Begin deployment of restricted weapon systems. Authorization Stone Alpha 7. Across her fleet, human warships began activating technologies that had been banned since the end of the last war. Quantum virus programs prepared to infiltrate enemy computer systems. Nanoswarm weapons armed themselves for molecular-level destruction. Psychological warfare broadcasts readied themselves to break enemy morale. The coalition forces around New Sydney suddenly found their ships behaving strangely. Navigation systems began reporting false positions. Weapons targeting computers developed mysterious glitches. Life support systems started experiencing random failures that forced crews to devote attention to basic survival instead of combat operations. Prince Zextar, commanding the attack from his flagship Hidden Glory, watched with growing alarm as his carefully coordinated assault began falling apart. Ships that should have been destroying human evacuation transports were instead struggling with system malfunctions that his engineers couldn't explain. "What's happening to our vessels?" he demanded of his technical staff. "Unknown, Your Highness," replied his chief engineer, a Zeltharian female whose 4 arms were working frantically at multiple control panels. "All systems show normal operation, but our ships are not responding correctly to commands." On the UES Devastator, Beth Stone smiled coldly as she watched the enemy fleet descending into chaos. The quantum virus programs were working exactly as designed, infiltrating alien systems through their stolen human technology and turning their own weapons against them. "Begin Phase 2, she ordered. Human ships that had been retreating suddenly turned and attacked with coordinated precision. The coalition forces found themselves facing weapons that seemed to predict their every move, tactics that countered their strategies before they could implement them, and technology that turned their own stolen designs into weaknesses. The battle for New Sydney lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the coalition fleet was in full retreat, leaving behind a third of their ships as burning wreckage. More importantly, for the psychological war both sides were fighting, the alien broadcast showed not human weakness but human fury. The footage that spread across the galaxy showed human warships moving with deadly grace through enemy formations, their weapons striking with surgical precision, while alien vessels exploded in helpless confusion. Young aliens who had been celebrating the coalition's early victories suddenly found themselves watching their heroes flee in panic from human retaliation. But the most important moment came when Prince Zextar's flagship was cornered by 3 human destroyers. Instead of destroying the alien vessel, Admiral Stone opened a communication channel that was broadcast to every ship in both fleets. "Prince Zextar," Beth's voice carried the authority of absolute certainty. You have made two mistakes. First, you forgot that we let you rebuild because we chose to, not because you earned it. Second, you attacked our families. The alien prince's golden eyes blazed with defiance. We will not bow to human tyranny any longer. The galaxy belongs to all species, not just yours. The galaxy belongs to whoever is strong enough to protect it, Beth replied. 50 years ago, your ancestors learned that we are stronger than anyone else wants to be. Today, you're going to learn the same lesson. The 3 human ships surrounding Zextar's vessel suddenly opened fire, but not to destroy. Their weapons precisely targeted the Coalition flagship's engines, weapons, and life support, leaving the ship crippled, but intact. The message was clear. Humanity could have killed every alien aboard, but chose not to. As Coalition survivors limped back toward their hidden bases, they carried with them the knowledge that human mercy was not weakness. The footage of the battle spread throughout alien space, showing young warriors who had dreamed of glorious victory instead, fleeing from enemies who fought with terrifying efficiency. The Liberation Coalition had wanted to prove that humans could be beaten. Instead, they had reminded the galaxy why their ancestors had surrendered 50 years earlier. The war was far from over, but the psychological advantage had shifted decisively. Humanity had been reminded that they were very good at violence when it became necessary. The aliens were about to learn just how good. Coalition's formation watched in horror as their heroes were systematically defeated by enemies who foe. The final battle of the Liberation War began not with weapons or tactics, but with a simple message broadcast across every communication network in the galaxy. Admiral Beth Stone appeared on screens throughout alien space, her image transmitted from the bridge of the UES Devastator, as her massive fleet prepared to end the rebellion once and for all. Citizens of the galaxy, she began, her voice carrying the authority of absolute power. 50 years ago, your leaders chose peace over war. They chose cooperation over conquest. They chose to build a better future for all species rather than repeat the mistakes of the past. Behind her, the tactical display showed the remnants of the Liberation Coalition's forces, gathering in the Cygnus sector for their final stand. Prince Zextar had managed to escape human custody during a prisoner transfer, and was now attempting to rally what remained of his scattered fleet. It was a pitifully small force compared to what they had started with, but desperation had made them dangerous. Today, Admiral Stone continued, a new generation of leaders has chosen differently. They have chosen war. They have forgotten the lessons their ancestors died learning, so we will teach those lessons again, and this time we will make sure they are never forgotten. The transmission ended with coordinates for the Cygnus sector and a simple warning. Any species that wished to avoid involvement in the coming battle should evacuate the area immediately. It was not a request but an ultimatum, and across the galaxy, alien governments began recalling their ships from the region. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Vigilant, watching through the view screen as the largest human fleet ever assembled prepared for combat. Over 200 warships had gathered, each one equipped with weapons that pushed the boundaries of known physics. It was a display of power that dwarfed anything seen since the end of the last Galactic War. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Amy Brooks, her voice tight with nervous excitement. "Long-range sensors detect Coalition forces in defensive positions around Kepler Station. Estimate 75 enemy vessels, mixed species configuration." Jake nodded grimly. The Coalition had chosen their final battleground well. Kepler Station was a massive civilian facility that housed representatives from dozens of alien species. By positioning themselves there, Zextar was hoping to use the civilian population as a shield against human retaliation. "Chief Park," Jake ordered, "deploy the quantum phase arrays. If they want to hide behind civilians, we'll show them why that was a mistake." Lisa Park's fingers moved across her control panel with practiced precision, activating weapon systems that could selectively target enemy vessels while leaving civilian structures completely unharmed. It was technology that demonstrated the true sophistication of human warfare, the ability to destroy specific targets while protecting everything else. Commander Ryan. Bell studied the tactical displays with the eyes of a veteran who had seen this before. "Captain, they're not trying to win this battle. They're trying to make us look like monsters when we attack a civilian station." "Then we won't give them what they want," Jake replied. "Signal the fleet, precision strikes only. Every civilian on that station goes home safely." and every Coalition ship becomes scrap metal. In the Coalition command center aboard Kepler Station, Prince Zextar watched the approaching human fleet with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. His rebellion had failed, his allies had deserted him, and most of his ships had been destroyed or captured. But he still had one card left to play. "Broadcast our final message to all species," he ordered his communications officer. "Tell them that we died today fighting for freedom, and that history will remember us as heroes." Hive Mother Sklix approached the prince's command station, her insectoid features showing the strain of weeks of constant defeat. "Your Highness, perhaps we should consider surrender. The humans have shown mercy to those who yield." "Mercy?" Zextar laughed bitterly. "They offer us the mercy of slavery. Better to die as free warriors than live as human servants." Mindspeaker Thylos projected his thoughts into their consciousness one final time, his telepathic voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "I have touched the minds of the human commanders. They do not want to destroy us. They want to teach us. Perhaps there is wisdom in learning from our defeat rather than dying for our pride." "You speak like a coward," Zextar snapped. "The Zeltharian Empire bows to no one." What he didn't understand was that the Zeltharian Empire had already died 50 years earlier. What remained was a shadow of former glory, kept alive only by human tolerance. Now that tolerance was about to end, and with it any pretense that the aliens were still independent powers. The human fleet approached Kepler Station with deadly precision, their formations designed to maximize firepower while minimizing the risk to civilian populations. Admiral Stone's tactical doctrine was based on overwhelming superiority applied with surgical precision. Destroy the enemy so completely that future resistance becomes impossible. "All ships," Stone's voice echoed across the fleet communication network. "Engage designated targets only. Civilian safety is our highest priority. Show them what human warfare looks like when we actually care about protecting innocents." The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. Human weapons struck with impossible accuracy, targeting Coalition vessels with pinpoint precision, while leaving the civilian station completely untouched. Enemy ships that tried to use the station's superstructure as cover found their positions compromised by weapons that could bend space to reach any target. Prince Zextar watched in helpless rage as his final fleet was systematically dismantled by enemies who fought with terrifying efficiency. His flagship Hidden Glory shuddered under precise strikes that disabled its weapons, engines, and life support systems, without actually destroying the vessel. The humans wanted him alive, and there was nothing he could do to prevent his capture. The most devastating moment came when human psychological warfare specialists began broadcasting on all Coalition frequencies. The messages weren't threats or propaganda. They were recordings of alien veterans from the last Galactic War, species elders who had tried to warn their children about the futility of challenging humanity. "We tried to tell you," came the voice of an elderly Zeltharian general who had fought at the Battle of Rigel. "We tried to explain why we surrendered, but you wouldn't listen. You thought we were cowards who gave up too easily. Now you know the truth. We surrendered because continuing to fight would have meant the extinction of our species." Similar messages played from Crick's elders, Forthak survivors, and representatives from every species that had participated in the original war. Their words carried more weight than any human propaganda could have, because they spoke from direct experience of what humanity was capable of when truly provoked. As Coalition resistance crumbled, civilian populations throughout the sector watched through the station's observation ports as human warships moved with choreographed precision through the wreckage of alien dreams. Children who had been raised on stories of their ancestors' warrior glory saw those same ancestors proven right about the impossibility of defeating humanity in open conflict. The final surrender came when Prince Zextar himself acknowledged defeat over the Coalition's main communication channel. "To all species of the galaxy," he said, his golden eyes reflecting the burning wreckage of his rebellion. "I, Prince Zextar the Bold, admit that the Liberation Coalition has failed. The humans have proven that their dominance is not based on fear or lies, but on capabilities that exceed our understanding." Admiral Stone accepted the surrender with the same professional courtesy she had shown throughout the conflict. "Prince Zextar, you and your surviving crews will be treated according to the terms of the Terra Accords. Your wounded will receive medical care, your prisoners will be fairly processed, and your people will be given the opportunity to rebuild their lives under human protection." The words, human protection, carried implications that were not lost on anyone listening. The aliens were no longer independent powers negotiating with equals. They were subjects under the authority of their human overseers. The pretense of the last 50 years had been stripped away, revealing the true balance of power in the galaxy. As the human fleet began rescue operations to save coalition survivors, footage of the battle spread throughout alien space with unprecedented speed. The images showed not human brutality or alien heroism, but the complete technological and tactical superiority of a species that had tried to be peaceful neighbors but remained apex predators when forced to fight. Young aliens who had celebrated the coalition's formation watched in stunned silence as their champions were defeated by enemies who treated warfare like a precisely choreographed performance. The message was unmistakable. Humanity didn't just win battles. They made victory look effortless. The Liberation War was over, but its consequences would reshape galactic civilization for generations to come. Every species now understood that human patience was a gift, not a weakness, and that gift could be withdrawn at any time. The galaxy had learned its lesson. The question now was whether they would remember it better than their ancestors had. The emergency session of the Terran High Council convened in the deepest levels of New Terra Command, where the walls were lined with memorial plaques bearing the names of the 2 billion humans who had died in the last galactic war. Admiral Beth Stone stood before the assembled military leaders, her expression grim as she prepared to unleash humanity's full potential. "Gentlemen, ladies," she began, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "The aliens have chosen war. They have attacked our civilians, destroyed our colonies, and forgotten the lessons their ancestors died learning. It is time to remind them why we rule this galaxy." Around the table sat the most dangerous collection of human military minds ever assembled: General Maria Santos, architect of the Deep Strike Doctrine that had shattered alien fleets during the war's final phase; Colonel Jack Hayes, whose Scorched Sky campaign had broken enemy morale across a dozen systems; Dr. Sam Carter, whose weapons designs had turned the tide when humanity faced extinction. Each of them had hoped they would never sit in this room again. Each of them had tried to live peaceful lives, believing that the galaxy had learned from the horrors of the last war. Now they were here because a new generation of aliens had decided that peace was weakness. "Dr. Carter," Admiral Stone said, "status report on restricted weapon systems." Sam activated the holographic display that showed the true scope of humanity's military capabilities. The weapons shown had been banned by the Terra Accords, not because they were illegal, but because they were so devastating that using them would be considered inhumane by galactic standards. "All quantum virus programs are online and deployed," Sam reported. "Enemy fleets are already experiencing system malfunctions as their stolen human technology turns against them. Nanoswarm weapons are armed and ready for molecular-level destruction. Psychological warfare broadcasts are prepared for deployment across all alien communication networks." General Santos leaned forward, studying the tactical projections. "What about troop deployments? If they're serious about this war, they'll try to take human worlds by ground assault." "Already handled," Colonel Hayes replied. "Reserve forces are being activated across all sectors. Veterans from the last war are being recalled to active duty. And we're implementing the Broken Arrow Protocol." The Broken Arrow Protocol was humanity's ultimate defensive measure, the complete militarization of civilian populations. Every human colony world would become a fortress, every civilian a potential soldier, every city a death trap for invading forces. It was the doctrine that had allowed humanity to hold out during the darkest days of the siege of Earth. "Admiral," Dr. Carter said quietly, "we need to discuss the psychological aspects of this campaign. The Coalition's propaganda is spreading throughout alien space. Young aliens who have never seen human warfare are celebrating what they think is their liberation." Beth Stone nodded grimly. She had been expecting this. The aliens who remembered the last war were trying to control their younger generation, but 50 years of peace had made the lessons seem like ancient history. Now those youngsters would learn firsthand why their elders had nightmares about human warfare. "Begin Phase 3 of the psychological campaign," she ordered. "I want every alien in the galaxy to see what happens when humans go to war." Captain Jake Morrison received his new orders while the UES Vigilant was still undergoing repairs from the first Coalition attack. The message was brief but chilling. His ship was to be retrofitted with weapon systems that had been sealed away since the end of the last war. More disturbing still, his crew was being supplemented with veterans who had fought in the original conflict. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Kim came aboard first, a small woman with graying hair and cold eyes who had been retired for 15 years. She moved through the ship with the confidence of someone who had seen humanity's worst enemies and helped destroy them. The younger crew members watched her with a mixture of awe and fear. "Colonel," Jake said as she reported to the bridge, "what exactly are we preparing for?" Sarah looked at him with the expression of someone who had watched alien fleets burn Earth cities and had spent years planning revenge. "Captain, we're preparing to show the galaxy what humans look like when we stop pretending to be civilized." Chief Engineer Lisa Park watched with growing unease as new weapon systems were installed throughout her ship. The quantum phase cannons could punch through any known armor. The molecular disruptor arrays could reduce enemy vessels to their component atoms. The neural scrambler broadcast could drive alien crews insane with carefully crafted psychological torture. "These weapons are overkill," she said to Commander Ryan Bell as they observed the installation process. "We could defeat the Coalition fleet with conventional weapons." Ryan, who had been present at the final alien surrender ceremony, shook his head grimly. "Lisa, this isn't about defeating the Coalition. This is about making sure no alien species ever again thinks they can challenge humanity. We're not just winning a war. We're ending the possibility of future wars." Meanwhile, in the hidden shipyards of the Andromeda Drift, Prince Zextar the Bold was discovering that leading a rebellion was more difficult than starting one. The Coalition's early victories had been followed by increasingly devastating defeats as human forces adapted to their tactics and began deploying technologies that seemed almost magical in their effectiveness. "Your Highness," reported Commander Jektai, his reptilian features showing barely controlled panic. "We've lost contact with 17 more ships in the past 6 hours. Our communications are being jammed. Our navigation systems are malfunctioning, and our crews are reporting psychological symptoms that our medics can't explain." Zextar studied the tactical displays with growing frustration. His carefully planned rebellion was falling apart, as human forces demonstrated capabilities that exceeded everything in their intelligence reports. Worse, the psychological warfare was beginning to affect his own troops as footage of human victories spread throughout the Coalition fleet. Hive Mother Assisclix clicked her mandibles nervously as she approached the prince's command station. "The younger warriors still fight with courage," she reported, "but the older ones who remember the last war are beginning to desert. They say the humans are using the same tactics that broke our ancestors." "The humans are just another species," Zextar insisted, but his voice lacked the confidence that had once inspired his followers. "Their technology is advanced, but they can still be defeated." Mindspeaker Thylos projected his thoughts into the prince's consciousness, his telepathic voice carrying undertones of growing fear. "I have tried to touch human minds during the battles. Their mental patterns are wrong. Organized chaos. Controlled fury. They think about warfare in ways that make no sense to us." Before Zexitar could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the hidden base. Coalition sensors detected massive energy signatures approaching their position. Human fleet formations moving with the deadly precision that had made them masters of the galaxy. Admiral Stone's task force dropped out of hyperspace with perfect coordination, their ships arranged in battle formations that had been developed during humanity's darkest hour. The UES Devastator led the assault, its weapons powered by technologies that could reshape matter at the atomic level. "Coalition vessels." Beth's voice echoed across all communication frequencies. "You are surrounded. Surrender immediately or face the consequences of your rebellion." Prince Zextar activated his fleet's communication system, broadcasting on all channels so that his words would be recorded for history. "Admiral Stone, we reject your ultimatum. The Liberation Coalition fights for the freedom of all species. We will not surrender to human tyranny." "Then you have chosen to learn the same lesson your ancestors did," Beth replied. "All ships execute Order 7. What followed was not a battle but a demonstration. Human warships moved through the Coalition fleet like predators among prey, their weapons striking with surgical precision, while their defenses rendered enemy attacks useless. Ships that tried to flee found their engines disabled. Vessels that attempted to surrender were captured intact. Those that continued fighting were systematically dismantled piece by piece. The most terrifying aspect was the complete lack of emotion in human communications. No anger, no hatred, no satisfaction, just cold, professional efficiency as they destroyed everything the Coalition had built. In 37 minutes, the hidden fleet that had taken 3 years to construct was either captured or reduced to scrap metal. Prince Zexistar found himself aboard Admiral Stone's flagship, his dreams of liberation shattered by the reality of human military superiority. "Why?" he asked as human soldiers escorted him to the detention area. "Why are you so much stronger than us?" Admiral Stone looked at him with the expression of someone who had seen her homeworld burn and had spent decades ensuring it would never happen again. "We're not stronger than you, Prince Zextar. We're just better at war than anyone else wants to be. Your ancestors learned that lesson 50 years ago. Today you learned it too." The footage of the battle spread throughout the galaxy within hours, showing alien viewers exactly what human warfare looked like when conducted without restraint. Young aliens who had celebrated the trials of the Liberation Coalition leaders took place on New Geneva Station, broadcast live across every inhabited world in the galaxy. It was humanity's way of ensuring that every alien species understood exactly what had happened and why. The proceedings were conducted with careful attention to galactic law, but everyone present understood that this was more than a legal process. It was a lesson in the consequences of challenging human authority. Judge Catherine Wells, a veteran of the original war crimes tribunals from 50 years earlier, presided over the hearings with the same methodical precision that had characterized the human military response. She had seen this before: alien leaders who started wars they couldn't finish, then claimed they were fighting for noble causes when faced with the consequences of their actions. Prince Zextar the Bold sat in the defendant's dock, his golden Zeltharian features showing none of the confidence that had once inspired his followers. The evidence against him was overwhelming: communications intercepts, surveillance footage, and testimony from former coalition members who had turned against their leadership when they realized the futility of their cause. "Your Highness," Judge Wells said with calm authority, "you stand accused of conspiracy to commit acts of terrorism, violation of the Terra Accords, and responsibility for the deaths of over 30,000 beings across 12 star systems. How do you plead?" Zextar stood slowly, his forearms hanging at his sides in the traditional Zeltharian gesture of submission. "I plead not guilty by reason of just cause, Your Honor. The Liberation Coalition fought to free our peoples from human oppression." "Oppression," Judge Wells repeated, consulting her notes. "Please describe to the court the nature of this oppression. Were your people enslaved? Were they denied basic rights? Were they prevented from practicing their cultures or governing their own affairs?" The question hung in the courtroom like a sword. Everyone present knew the answer, because the reality of alien life under human protection was a matter of public record. Alien species maintained their own governments, practiced their own religions, and conducted their own internal affairs with minimal human interference. "We were denied the right to self-determination," Zextar replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "We were forced to accept human authority in matters that should have been our own decisions." "Such as?" Judge Wells prompted. "Military affairs, territorial expansion, trade agreements with species outside the human sphere of influence." Judge Wells nodded as if this was exactly what she had expected. "So your definition of oppression includes being prevented from building military forces capable of threatening other species, being denied the ability to conquer new territories, and being restricted in your trade with potential enemies of galactic peace." The absurdity of the Coalition's position became clear to everyone watching. They had not been fighting against tyranny, but against the very restrictions that had prevented another galactic war. Their rebellion had been motivated not by suffering but by ambition. Dr. Nathan Webb testified as an expert witness on alien social movements. His analysis of coalition propaganda, revealing the psychological factors that had driven young aliens to rebellion. The defendants exploited generational differences between war veterans and their descendants, he explained to the court. They convinced young aliens that their elders' warnings about human capabilities were exaggerated stories designed to justify cowardice. And what was the result of this propaganda? Judge Wells asked. A generation of aliens who believed they could challenge humanity without understanding the consequences. They saw human peacekeeping forces and concluded that humans were weak. They observed human diplomatic cooperation and decided that humans were naive. They fundamentally misunderstood the difference between choosing not to use power and lacking power. The trial's most dramatic moment came when Admiral Beth Stone took the witness stand to explain humanity's military doctrine. Her testimony was broadcast throughout the galaxy, ensuring that every alien leader would understand exactly how humans approached warfare. "Admiral," Judge Wells said, "please explain to the court why human forces were able to defeat a coalition of 7 species with such apparent ease." Beth Stone looked directly at the alien defendants as she answered, "Your Honor, the coalition made the same mistake that every enemy of humanity has made. They assumed that our peaceful behavior indicated weakness. They failed to understand that we choose peace because we are very good at war." "Can you elaborate on that distinction?" "Certainly. A weak species avoids conflict because they fear defeat. A strong species avoids conflict because they understand its true costs. The coalition saw our restraint and concluded that we couldn't fight. In reality, we were restraining ourselves because we knew exactly what would happen if we didn't." Prince Zextar interrupted from the defendant's dock. "You speak of restraint, but you destroyed my entire fleet in less than an hour. You call that merciful?" Admiral Stone turned to look at him directly. "Your Highness, mercy is not defined by letting enemies win. Mercy is defined by how you treat them after you've won. Your crews are alive, your wounded have been treated, and you're receiving a fair trial according to galactic law. 50 years ago, enemy prisoners were not always so fortunate." The implications of her words sent a chill through the alien observers. Admiral Stone was reminding them that humanity's current policies represented unprecedented leniency compared to their historical behavior. The message was clear. Current restrictions could become much harsher if future rebellions made such changes necessary. Captain Jake Morrison testified about the tactical aspects of the conflict, his analysis revealing the technological advantages that made human victory inevitable. "The coalition's ships were based on stolen human designs," he explained, "but they were 50-year-old designs. Our current technology is several generations more advanced." "Even if the coalition had possessed current human technology," Judge Wells asked, "would the outcome have been different?" Jake considered the question carefully. "No, Your Honor. Technology is only as effective as the tactics used to deploy it. Human military doctrine is based on centuries of warfare experience against enemies who were desperately trying to kill us. We have learned to fight efficiently because inefficiency meant extinction." The psychological testimony proved most disturbing to alien observers. Dr. Sarah Kim, the military psychologist who had designed humanity's mental warfare programs, explained how human forces had broken coalition morale without resorting to physical torture. "We broadcast recordings of the original war to coalition crews," she testified. "Not propaganda, but actual combat footage showing what happened to their ancestors. The psychological impact was devastating because they finally understood what they were really fighting against." And the effect on coalition forces? Complete breakdown of unit cohesion within hours. Veterans who remembered the original war began deserting immediately. Younger crew members who had been confident of victory experienced severe psychological trauma when confronted with the reality of human warfare. Many requested immediate transfer to medical facilities rather than continue fighting. The trials concluded with Judge Wells delivering verdicts that would reshape galactic law for generations to come. Prince Zextar and his inner circle received sentences of 50 years imprisonment, but with the possibility of reduced terms for cooperation with post-war reconstruction efforts. More importantly, the legal precedent established that rebellion against the galactic peace structure would be considered a crime against all species, not just humanity. But the real impact of the trials was not legal but psychological. Alien populations throughout the galaxy had watched their would-be liberators reduced to defeated criminals whose grand rebellion had accomplished nothing except proving human superiority. The footage of coalition leaders admitting their mistakes became required viewing in alien schools, ensuring that future generations would understand the futility of challenging human authority. Ambassador Kate Hughes worked with alien diplomats to draft the New Geneva Accords, a comprehensive treaty that updated galactic law to prevent future liberation coalitions. The new agreements included mandatory education programs about the reality of human capabilities, psychological evaluation of potential military leaders, and early intervention protocols to identify and address anti-human sentiment before it could develop into organized rebellion. The goal, Kate explained to the assembled alien ambassadors, is not to suppress your cultures or prevent legitimate grievances from being addressed. The goal is to ensure that future disagreements are resolved through diplomacy rather than warfare. The alien representatives agreed to the new restrictions with varying degrees of enthusiasm, but all of them understood that agreement was not really optional. The Liberation War had demonstrated that challenging humanity was not just futile, but actively counterproductive. Instead of gaining more freedom, rebellious species now found themselves under much closer supervision. As the trials ended and the new treaties were signed, veteran human officers like Jake Morrison returned to their patrol duties with mixed feelings. They had proven once again that humanity could defend itself, when necessary, but the cost had been the end of the post-war era's relative innocence. The galaxy had been reminded 25 years had passed since the Liberation War ended, and the galaxy had settled into a new understanding of its place in the universe. Admiral Jake Morrison, now 70 years old and commander of the Terran Defense Academy, stood before a classroom filled with young cadets from dozens of different species. Human, Zeltharian, Krix, Vorthak, and many others sat together, their uniforms bearing the same insignia of service to galactic peace. "Can anyone tell me," Jake asked his students, "why the Liberation Coalition failed?" A young Zeltharian cadet raised his hand. "Admiral, they underestimated human military capabilities and failed to understand the technological advantages that made victory impossible." "That's part of it," Jake agreed. "But not the most important part." "Anyone else?" A human cadet spoke up. "Sir, they failed to achieve popular support among their own people. Most aliens remembered the original war and didn't want to repeat it." "Getting closer." "Lieutenant Kim?" He nodded to a young Krix female whose compound eyes reflected the lights of the classroom. "Admiral Morrison, they failed because they were fighting the wrong war for the wrong reasons," she said in the clicking speech of her species. "They thought they were fighting for freedom, but they were actually fighting against the peace that kept everyone safe." Jake smiled approvingly. "Exactly right. The Coalition's fundamental mistake was believing that human authority was the problem, when in fact it was the solution to a much larger problem: the tendency of species to make war on each other when left to their own devices." He activated the holographic display that showed galactic maps from before, during, and after the last galactic war. The images told the story of a galaxy transformed from constant warfare to unprecedented peace under human guidance. Before human intervention, Jake continued, the average lifespan of an interstellar civilization was 200 years before they either destroyed themselves or were conquered by neighbors. The Zeltharian Empire was at war with someone for 90% of its existence. The Krix swarms consumed 17 different species over 3 centuries. The Vorthak Collective enslaved entire star systems. The alien cadets shifted uncomfortably as they were reminded of their species' violent histories. But Jake's tone was not accusatory, it was educational. "This wasn't because you were evil," he explained. "It was because you were normal. Every species develops the same way. They achieve interstellar travel, encounter competitors for resources, and default to warfare as the solution to scarcity. Humans did the same thing for thousands of years before we learned better." "Sir," asked a young Brutani cadet, "what made humans different?" "We had longer to learn from our mistakes," Jake replied. "Earth is a difficult world that produced a species that was very good at warfare, but also very aware of its costs. We spent millennia fighting each other before we developed weapons capable of ending our entire civilization. That taught us something that most species never get the chance to learn, that winning wars is less important than preventing them." He changed the display to show current galactic statistics. Trade volumes had increased by 3,000% since the end of the last galactic war. Interspecies cooperation had reached unprecedented levels. Scientific advancement had accelerated as species shared knowledge instead of hoarding it for military advantage. The Liberation Coalition saw human restrictions and called them oppression, Jake continued. But those restrictions are what allowed this. He gestured to the diverse classroom around him. Zeltharian engineers working with Krix biologists, Vorthak telepaths helping human psychologists understand consciousness, Brutani strength combined with Sindari precision in joint construction projects. The students looked around at each other, seeing classmates who would have been enemies just a generation earlier. The young Zeltharian cadet who had answered the first Question sat next to a human whose grandfather had fought at the Siege of Earth. The Crick's female worked on assignments with Vorthak teammates, whose species had once been mortal. Enemies, Admiral, asked the human cadet. Do you think there will be another rebellion? Jake considered the question carefully. It was one that haunted every human military leader. The possibility that each generation would have to learn the same lessons through violence and loss. There might be, he admitted. Every few generations, young beings question the wisdom of their elders. Some of them will always believe they can do better than those who came before. The question is whether we can teach them why their ancestors made the choices they did. He activated a final holographic display that showed footage from the Liberation War trials. Prince Zextar the Bold, once proud and confident, admitting his mistakes and warning other species against repeating them. Hive Mother Sisklix explaining to her own descendants why the Cricks had joined humanity's side after their defeat. Mindspeaker Thylos broadcasting telepathic messages throughout Vorthak space about the futility of challenging human authority. The leaders of the Liberation Coalition became our greatest allies in preventing future wars, Jake explained. Not because we forced them to, but because they finally understood what their elders had been trying to tell them. Sometimes the only way to learn a lesson is to experience it yourself. After class ended, Jake walked through the Academy's memorial garden, where plaques honored the dead from both galactic wars. Human and alien names were listed together, recognizing that loss of life was tragedy regardless of species. The garden served as a reminder that peace was built on the sacrifices of those who had learned its value through suffering. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Brooks, now the Academy's chief instructor, joined him on his evening walk. She had served under him during the Liberation War and had seen firsthand how quickly peace could be shattered by those who misunderstood its foundations. The new class seems promising, she said, but I worry about the ones who aren't here. The young aliens who refuse to serve in integrated units or attend human-supervised education programs. There will always be some who reject cooperation, Jake agreed. But as long as the majority understand the benefits of peace, the dissidents remain manageable. They paused at a memorial dedicated to the civilian victims of the Liberation War. The names included humans who had died on New Sydney, but also aliens who had been caught in the crossfire of their own people's rebellion. War made no distinctions between species when it came to tragedy. Do you think we're doing the right thing? Amy asked. Maintaining peace through strength, preventing wars through the threat of overwhelming retaliation? Jake looked up at the stars visible through the garden's transparent dome. Somewhere out there, human patrol fleets maintained their vigilant watch over trade routes and colony worlds. Alien governments conducted their business under human supervision. Potential conflicts were resolved through diplomacy backed by the knowledge that warfare would be suicidal for anyone who chose it. I think, he said slowly, that we're doing the necessary thing. Peace isn't natural, it has to be maintained. Freedom isn't free, it has to be protected. The galaxy is safer because everyone knows that humanity has the will and ability to enforce the peace. But at what cost? Amy pressed. We've become the galaxy's police force, judge, and executioner. That's a lot of responsibility for one species. It's the responsibility that comes with power, Jake replied. We could have destroyed every alien species after the original war. We could have enslaved them, colonized their worlds, and treated them as resources to be exploited. Instead, we chose to guide them toward a better future. Amy nodded, understanding the weight of that decision. And if they rebel again? Then we'll remind them why their ancestors chose peace, Jake said with quiet certainty. The galaxy has learned that challenging humanity is pointless. Each generation that tries discovers the same truth their elders knew, that we're not their enemies, we're their protectors, even when they hate us for it. As they completed their walk through the memorial garden, Jake reflected on the strange path that had brought him from a young captain on a routine patrol to the leader of the institution that trained the galaxy's peacekeepers. The Liberation War had been a tragedy, but it had also been a necessary reminder that peace required vigilance. Far across the galaxy, in the rebuilt cities of former coalition worlds, alien children learned human history alongside their own. They studied the wars that had shaped their ancestors and the peace that had given them opportunities their parents never imagined. Most of them understood that human authority was not oppression, but protection. The shield that stood between them and the chaos that had once consumed their civilizations. In the Zeltharian territories, Prince Zextar the Bold had been released from prison after serving 15 years of his sentence. Now an old alien broken by the weight of his mistakes, he spent his remaining years traveling to schools and community centers, warning young Zeltharians about the futility of rebellion and the importance of cooperation with human authority. I thought I was a hero, he would tell audiences of wide-eyed youngsters. I thought I was fighting for freedom, but I was really fighting against the very thing that kept us safe. The humans didn't conquer us, they saved us from ourselves, the Crick's home.